San Francisco in the late 1960s was a city caught between peace and chaos. The summer of love had come and gone, leaving behind a vibrant counterculture, anti-war protests, and a sense that the world was changing fast. But beneath the music, the art, and the idealism, another story was unfolding, one far darker. Somewhere in Northern California, a killer was watching. He didn't just murder. He taunted. He sent letters, strange, cryptic, and chilling, to the press and the police. Each was signed with a symbol, a circle with a cross through it. And in those letters, he claimed responsibility for deaths and promised more to come. The press would call him the Zodiac Killer. His crimes would be confirmed in 5 murders between December 1968 and October 1969, but he claimed as many as 37. His identity has never been proven. His letters contained coded messages, some solved, others still a mystery, and his arrogance kept law enforcement and the public in a constant state of unease. More than 50 years later, the case remains one of America's most enduring unsolved mysteries. It has inspired books, films, and countless theories. But beyond the pop culture fascination lies the reality. Real victims, real families, and an investigation that continues to this day. You might ask yourself, why does this case still hold our attention? Is it the audacity of a killer who played games with the police? The unanswered questions? Or perhaps it's because, in a world where technology can track almost anyone, the Zodiac seems to have slipped through time untouched. Today, we're not chasing rumors or wild speculation. We're focusing only on the confirmed facts, drawn from FBI files, official police reports, and verified historical accounts. This is the Zodiac Killer as history records him, stripped of sensationalism, but no less haunting. To understand the man, or men, behind the name, we have to start where it all began. With the young lives cut short, the quiet nights shattered, and the first moments when Northern California realized something was terribly wrong. So, let's go back to December 1968. By the end of the 1960s, California was a place of contradictions. In San Francisco, the Haight-Ashbury district pulsed with music, flower power, and anti-war marches. Across the state, the hippie movement promised peace and love. But not far from the city, quiet rural roads and small towns still carried a slower rhythm. A place where people left their doors unlocked and teenagers spent their evenings parked along country lanes, talking under the stars. It was in this world, balanced between optimism and innocence, that the Zodiac would strike for the first time. The first attack, December 20th, 1968. On a cold Friday night in Benicia, 17-year-old David Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen went out on their first date. They were young, hopeful, and like so many teenagers then, looking forward to the holidays. Around 10:15 p.m., the couple parked along a gravel turnout on Lake Herman Road, a quiet spot where local kids sometimes gathered. Sometime between 10:15 and 11 o'clock, a car pulled up beside them. Witnesses later reported hearing shots in the distance. When officers arrived just after 11 p.m., they found the young couple outside their Rambler station wagon. David had been shot once in the head at close range. Betty Lou had run, but collapsed 28 feet away, struck by 5 bullets in her back. There were no signs of robbery or assault. No one could explain why they were targeted. For the Benicia community, it was a shock. Random killings like this simply didn't happen here. The second attack, July 4th, 1969. Just over 6 months later, another quiet night turned deadly. This time in Vallejo, a city roughly 20 miles away. Darlene Farron, 22, was a young mother, well-liked and outgoing. She was spending the evening with 19-year-old Michael Mageau, a friend. At around midnight, they parked at Blue Rock Springs Park, a known local hangout. Minutes later, another car pulled in behind them. The driver left briefly, then returned. This time, he approached their car with a flashlight. Without warning, he fired multiple shots through the passenger window. Both were hit. The attacker then walked away, but came back, firing several more rounds. Despite his injuries, Michael survived and later described the shooter as a stocky white male, possibly in his late 20s to early 30s, wearing glasses. Darlene wasn't so fortunate. She died before reaching the hospital. A pattern emerges. At this point, police didn't yet know they were dealing with a serial killer. But the similarities were there. Young couples, parked in secluded spots, attacked without warning. No theft. No clear motive. Just sudden lethal violence. It was what happened next that changed everything. Within hours of the Vallejo shooting, a man called the police department. His voice was calm, almost detached. He claimed responsibility for the attack on Darlene and Michael, and for the murders on Lake Herman Road the previous December. He even gave details that had never been released to the public. That phone call marked the moment the killer stepped out of the shadows and into the public eye. He wasn't content to simply kill. He wanted to be known. He wanted control over the narrative. The victims behind the headlines. David, Betty Lou, Darlene, and Michael weren't just names in a case file. They were real people with families, dreams, and futures ahead of them. David had been a scholar and athlete, polite and well-liked. Betty Lou was energetic, looking forward to graduating high school. Darlene was vibrant, juggling work, motherhood, and a busy social life. Michael, despite surviving, would carry the physical and emotional scars for the rest of his life. For viewers today, it's important to remember that before the mystery, before the theories, there were lives cut short. Their stories are why the case matters. But for the killer, these attacks were only the beginning. Soon, he would reveal himself, not in person, but in writing. He would send letters filled with puzzles, taunts, and demands, turning the investigation into a public game. And with that, the Zodiac's reign of fear truly began. By late September 1969, the Zodiac had already left Northern California shaken. But his next attack would be unlike anything before, and far more theatrical. Lake Berryessa, September 27, 1969. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when Brian Hartnell, a 20-year-old college student, and Cecilia Shepard, 22, drove to Lake Berryessa, a peaceful getaway about 80 miles from San Francisco. They picnicked on a small island connected to the shore by a sandbar. The lake was calm, the day unremarkable, until a man appeared from behind a tree. He wore a dark hood, similar to an executioner's mask, with clip-on sunglasses covering the eye holes. On his chest was the now infamous Zodiac symbol, a white crosshair inside a circle. In his hand, a gun. He told them he was an escaped convict from Deer Lodge Prison in Montana and needed their car and money to get to Mexico. Then, he pulled out clothesline to tie them up. Brian and Cecilia complied, believing it was just a robbery. But then, without warning, the man drew a knife and began stabbing. Brian was stabbed 6 times in the back, Cecilia 10 times. The attacker then calmly walked back up the hill, drove Brian's car closer, and took a marker from his pocket. On the car door, he wrote, Vallejo, December 20th, 68, July 4th, 69, September 27-69-6:30. By knife. He signed it with the crosshair symbol. Cecilia would die 2 days later in the hospital. Brian survived, later giving police a detailed description of the attacker's voice, manner, and clothing. San Francisco, October 11th, 1969. 2 weeks later, the Zodiac struck again, this time in the city itself. Paul Stein, a 29-year-old taxi driver, picked up a fare at the intersection of Mason and Geary Streets in San Francisco. The passenger asked to go to Presidio Heights, an upscale neighborhood. At the corner of Washington and Cherry, the passenger suddenly shot Stein in the head with a 9mm handgun. He then took Stein's wallet, keys, and ripped off a piece of his bloody shirt. Several witnesses saw the killer from a nearby house. They described him as a white male, about 35 to 45 years old, stocky build, with a crew cut and glasses. Police units arrived quickly, but due to a miscommunication, the suspect description went out as a black male adult. The Zodiac walked calmly away into the night, blending into the neighborhood. The letters begin. If the murders were terrifying, the letters made them unforgettable. On August 1st, 1969, just after the Blue Rock Springs attack, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald each received a letter from someone claiming to be the killer. Each letter was nearly identical and included 1/3 of a 408-symbol cipher. The writer demanded the cipher be printed on the front page, warning that if it wasn't, he would cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night. The cipher was quickly solved by a schoolteacher and his wife. It read, in part, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." Over the next few months, the Zodiac would send more letters, some boasting of his crimes, others threatening future attacks. He began to use the crosshair symbol as his signature, and in his correspondence, he claimed to have killed 37 people, though only 5 have been confirmed. The bus bomb letter and beyond. After Paul Stein's murder, the Chronicle received perhaps the most chilling letter yet. Inside was a piece of Stein's shirt, proving the writer's identity as the killer. In it, he threatened to shoot schoolchildren as they got off buses. Later came the so-called button letter, in which the Zodiac demanded people wear Zodiac crosshair buttons, like campaign pins. He threatened to detonate a bomb unless his request was met. He even sent diagrams of his death machine, a supposed bomb that could be planted along a roadside. Another strange note was the Dragon card, mailed to the Chronicle in April 1970. It featured a cartoon dragon and cryptic messages, once again taunting the police. A killer who wanted to be heard. What made the Zodiac unique was that his crimes were only half the story. The other half played out in newspapers, police stations, and living rooms across America. He wanted headlines. He wanted his words read. And he wanted the public to know he was out there, choosing his next victim at will. Imagine for a moment, you're reading the morning paper with your coffee, and you see a letter from the man who has been killing in your own city. He's mocking the police. He's promising more deaths. And no one knows who he is. That was the atmosphere in Northern California from 1969 into the early 1970s. Even today, reading those letters, you can feel the arrogance in his tone. He wrote as if he was untouchable, as if the police were just characters in his game. The stage is set. By now, the Zodiac had killed in both rural and urban settings, used both guns and knives, and escaped every time. His letters had turned a local investigation into a statewide manhunt, and one of the largest in U.S. history. And the public, now hooked on every word and update, was about to witness one of the most intense criminal chases of the 20th century. Next, we'll follow that chase, into the evidence, the suspects, and the endless theories that have kept the Zodiac case alive for more than 50 years. By late 1969, the Zodiac case had grown far beyond the capacity of any single police department. The murders spanned multiple jurisdictions, each with its own files, witnesses, and theories. The investigation. The Vallejo Police Department, the San Francisco Police Department, the Napa County Sheriff's Office, and eventually the FBI all became involved. But this was decades before modern computer databases. Agencies often worked in silos, and crucial details sometimes took weeks to be shared, if they were shared at all. One of the most baffling elements for investigators was the Zodiac's ciphers. His first, the 408-symbol cipher, had been solved by civilians. But the second major puzzle, the 340 cipher, sent to the Chronicle in November 1969, remained unsolved for more than 50 years. The killer seemed to take pleasure in creating codes that toyed with the limits of cryptography at the time. Investigators chased thousands of tips, interviewed countless witnesses, and compared ballistics between crime scenes. But each lead seemed to dissolve into uncertainty. They had fingerprints from the Paul Stein murder scene. They had handwriting from the letters. They had a composite sketch. Yet none of these pointed conclusively to a single person. Arthur Lee Allen, the prime suspect. Among the many names that surfaced, one stood out: Arthur Lee Allen. Allen was a former schoolteacher, dishonorably discharged from the Navy, and known for erratic behavior. He lived in Vallejo, close to the first murders, and owned a Zodiac brand wristwatch with the same crosshair logo the killer used. In interviews, Allen made odd remarks. When police asked him what he did on the day of the Lake Berryessa attack, his alibi was vague. Friends claimed he had talked about wanting to kill couples in remote areas. Investigators searched his home in 1972, finding weapons and disturbing materials, but nothing directly linking him to the murders. A second search in 1991 again failed to produce physical evidence. Handwriting experts compared Allen's writing to the Zodiac letters and found inconsistencies. When Allen died in 1992, some detectives were convinced the case had died with him. But DNA evidence later extracted from the stamps and envelopes of Zodiac's letters did not match Allen's profile. At least, not with the partial DNA available. Other suspects. The decades brought new names and new theories. In 2021, a group of independent investigators called the Case Breakers claimed the Zodiac was a man named Gary Francis Post, a house painter and Air Force veteran who died in 2018. They pointed to physical similarities to the police sketch and alleged coded references to his name in the Zodiac's letters. However, law enforcement agencies have not officially confirmed Post as a suspect. The evidence, while intriguing, remains circumstantial. There were also other persons of interest over the years: teachers, drifters, even celebrities accused by conspiracy theorists, but none have been definitively tied to the crimes. The truth is, many men fit parts of the Zodiac's description, but none fit all of it in a way that satisfied the burden of proof. The challenges. One of the greatest obstacles to solving the Zodiac case is the lack of clear forensic evidence. The killer was careful. He wore gloves. He used multiple weapons. His attacks were quick, and his escapes well planned. The letters stopped after 1974, at least officially. Without new correspondence, the psychological profile became stale. Witness memories faded. Physical evidence degraded. And every passing year made the possibility of catching the Zodiac smaller. Even the DNA we have is uncertain. It's not always clear if the stamps and envelopes were licked by the killer himself, or by someone else, like a postal worker or assistant. Without full, verified genetic material, modern investigative tools like genetic genealogy can't deliver a definitive match. A modern breakthrough. Still, the case hasn't been frozen in time. In December 2020, an international team of codebreakers finally cracked the 340 cipher. After decades of failed attempts, the message revealed more taunting but no new leads. I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner. It was another reminder. For the Zodiac, this was never just about killing. It was about control, over the police, the media, and the public imagination. The enduring mystery. Today, the case remains open in several jurisdictions. Officially, the Zodiac killed 5 people and injured 2. Unofficially, he claimed 37 victims. His identity has never been confirmed. Some believe he died decades ago. Others think he could still be alive. An old man, perhaps living quietly somewhere, watching documentaries about himself. Think about it. In the age of cell phones, surveillance cameras, and instant DNA testing, the Zodiac's methods might not have worked. But in the late 1960s and early 1970s, he was able to outwit every agency on his trail. Arthur Lee Allen, Gary Post, and dozens of others whose names have been whispered in police stations and living rooms. Each has his believers, and each has his doubters. But until the day someone finds irrefutable proof, the Zodiac remains an open question mark, one that has haunted California and America for more than half a century. Next, we'll step back from the suspects and ask, what can we actually learn from this case? Beyond the mystery, what lessons does it offer about investigation, communication, and the human fascination with unsolved crimes? More than half a century has passed since the Zodiac's first confirmed attack. And yet, his identity remains a blank space in one of America's most notorious criminal puzzles. We've followed the timeline, from those quiet, starlit nights shattered by gunfire, to the taunting letters that held the nation's attention, to decades of investigation and suspects who almost fit, but never completely. And still no arrest. No trial. No final answer. The Zodiac's shadow stretches far beyond the case files. He has inspired books, documentaries, and the 2007 David Fincher film Zodiac, which brought the story to a new generation. For true crime enthusiasts, he's become a symbol of the ultimate cold case, a riddle that refuses to be solved. But behind the codes and headlines are real people. Families who never saw justice. Friends who never had closure. The story is not just about a killer, it's about the silence left in his wake. Technology has changed since the late 1960s. Today, DNA analysis, digital forensics, and global databases can solve cases that once seemed impossible. The Golden State Killer was caught after 40 years. There's reason to believe that persistence, combined with new tools, could one day unmask the Zodiac too. If you, or someone you know, has information, no matter how small, you can contact the FBI or local law enforcement. Cold cases are solved when someone finally speaks up. So as we close this chapter, remember, mysteries are only unsolvable until they're not. The Zodiac case reminds us that patience, persistence, and public awareness can eventually crack even the toughest puzzle. If you've been intrigued by this journey into the unknown, share your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think the Zodiac was? Do you believe the answer is still out there? And if you enjoy exploring history's great mysteries, hit subscribe. So together we can keep searching, questioning, and maybe one day finding the truth.